This Pitch Breakfast video is brought to you by Spangler and Agins.
Good morning. This is Synshark, and it's a story of biology, and it's a story of a supply curve that's extremely stressed and a demand curve that was also extremely stressed and never really matched each other. And through a technology that was funded through an ARPA-E grant at $5 million to Texas A&M University, we were able to come up with a novel solution to meet these two supply and demand curves, which serves into a $200 million market and later can serve into a $1 billion market. And these are specialty chemicals. So sometimes the story is a little bit less interesting because we say, how do I relate to that specific product? So I'll start with the demand side. On the demand side, we're talking about a compound that your skin makes, but unfortunately, when you arrive to 25, you stop making it so much. And it's your skin's natural protection against hazards such as radiation. It's called squalene. It's a long-chain hydrocarbon. And as it's studied more and more, cosmetic companies and pharmaceutical companies are increasing their use of squalene by 25% per year. The problem is that to get squalene, we take it out of sharks' livers. 3 to 5 million deep water sharks are killed each year to provide us squalene, and to arrive to our 2019 level, we will probably need 30 million sharks. This is an impossibility. On the flip side, Texas A&M was awarded a contract by ARPA-E, the DARPA of energy, to provide a novel solution for biotechnology, for specifically coming up with an energy solution or a hydrocarbon. And the concept was to allow tobacco to create, rather than sugar into a fuel, to directly create squalene. But the squalene, to be then refined into fuel, would only sell for $1 a liter. So we created Synshark to leverage that point to sell squalene, which is sold for $30 a liter and comes from shark livers, directly made out of tobacco, a source that is under pressure in the United States, and this can be a healthy solution for this market. So we are Synshark.
Could you just talk more about what we do with the squalene once we get it?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's an emollient inside of cosmetics, and it's an adjuvant inside of vaccines. And it's actually that vaccine side that's driving the market so hard right now. In particular, the different flu vaccines, more and more emollient put into that is increasing the success of flu vaccines. And this particular emollient, being so natural to the human body, is of particular interest. The problem for pharmaceutical companies is they simply don't want to have a supply chain that's not only inhibited by the fact that you can't simply get an extra 25 million sharks, but it's also something that people don't appreciate.
Right. Okay.
So the problem is we're having to kill too many sharks to get the squalene?
Well, we need more of the stuff.
Well, I guess we will.
Like, yeah, our only path to getting it is more dead sharks. So to save the sharks.
So,
right?
but I was just trying to get as to whether the market was 200 million and growing because there aren't enough sharks, or there's only $200 million worth of demand for this.
No, so the demand is increasing significantly, and the problem is that there'll probably be an increase in price on that, except that the yields that we've created, which are about 10 times the record yields prior to this out of plant. Sometimes you can derive this from olives, for example. So we're at about a 7% yield versus a 0.6% yield at the current record. We can derive this out of tobacco. So it's about 3 years into this $5 million grant, and we've been able to increase this by not focusing on taking it through a level into sugar, which is your normal way to create a hydrocarbon, but actually bypassing that and teaching the plant itself to actually generate squalene at high levels, and then retaining that actually is a pretty important part of the technology.
So this is really, like this, they're the first squalene presentation I've heard this week. There's a lot of times when, like I think you'd agree with me, when we hear science-based value propositions where there's gigantic potential if scientific outcome X occurs, right? And scientific outcome X is impossible for a layman to judge, right? How far along, like, are you guys waiting for some outcome that's never happened before? Or is this like does this already happen, or could you talk about that a little bit?
So I build companies based on chemistry. So we're 2 years into the building of Synshark. We've just never brought Synshark to market until we reached a certain point. So we're at a laboratory point of 7% yield. We expect to have about 3% in our North Carolina field trial, which is over an acre, accepting that we're going to have lots of failures to that versus the laboratory yield. So when we started this, we looked at where the technology was, which was at that 0.6% yield, and that's not marketable. The cash flow positive point exists at 5%. We're laboratory at 7%. The goal of ARPA-E, in order to get to a point where you could actually sell $1 petrol, for example, would be about 20%. So we expect it to go to market at about 3 to 5% and grow over 5 years, but we're at 7% in the laboratory. So it's 20% may be possible. But we don't accept that because we're really allied along a different market, not petrol, but instead selling specialty chemical, which is squalene.
I have a lot of questions, but I think you did and that's a good thing.
That was really
typically.
interesting. It was a really good pitch.
I think you did a very good job of pitching in 2 minutes something fairly complicated. But I think I agree with Chris, though. I think you probably didn't, you could have thrown in a little bit of what you're just saying, where you are, because science is science, and where you are is pretty important. It has to do with where investors want to invest and their comfort level of investing really early or when you're ready to sell. So I think that's really important. Maybe this general audience, maybe not so much, but when you're pitching to an investor, you really need to understand that. And
Are you raising right now?
We are,
Yeah, he did mention-
750,000.
Okay. There's that guy in Durham.
You did talk about the cosmetics part, and that was clear. I didn't understand the fuel part.
I didn't either.
Right, so we're actually ignoring the fuel market for now. I mean, we do get a lot of money from the federal government, which is driven towards fuel.
Right.
But it's a hydrocarbon. So since squalene is a hydrocarbon, you can break it apart into smaller chain hydrocarbons and create a fuel. But the problem with the biofuel market is that gasoline is very energy dense and it's very cheap. It's $1 a liter. And if you simply look at this from an economics point of view, at $30 a liter, then I have to refine it to get to $1 a liter. It's actually straightforward to be a chemicals company.
And you couldn't get to interesting volumes anyway.
So one big question that I have, and without knowing any of the science about this, is if you can get something out of a shark liver, and you can do the same thing with tobacco, I can imagine there's a gazillion other ways to do this too. And I think you probably would have to convince me that you have something unique that other people aren't working on, that somebody will get it out of some other material or method, because there's so many ways probably of getting this done.
So the answer is that you need it to come from a natural driven organism, because that's where squalene is made, and that's why we get it out of the shark. And the shark particularly makes it because these are deep water sharks, and it allows it to actually sit on the bottom of the ocean as opposed to float to the top. Since it's a long chain hydrocarbon, its liver is quite large and full of this. But that's actually somewhat of an environmental tragedy. So you look towards plants, which also make this, as we make this, but at very small amounts. The tobacco plant in particular is one of the most interesting plants to engineer because its leaf is so large. In fact, the Ebola vaccine came from the tobacco plant, and that was a project driven by the cousin of ARPA-E called DARPA to find solutions for these radical diseases. So the tobacco plant actually is an excellent platform for this. And switching costs, we're in North Carolina where you make about $3,000 an acre producing tobacco, where you could be making probably about $14,000 an acre producing squalene out of this tobacco. Yeah. So it offers an opportunity where you have switching going on towards things like tilapia farming or sweet potato farming, which can't come near the revenue marks of a specialty chemical. Our IP, though, is derived across planta in general, so it isn't just totally focused on tobacco, but the funding was into tobacco. We think tobacco is a great starting platform.
So what percentage yield is your goal before you start commercializing this?
Our goal, actually, if our laboratory percentage at 7% is far above profitability. 5%, we have a field trial, and we have a farm now committed to us, which is up to 600 growable acres with this type of tobacco. If we reach 3%, we'll go back next year for 5% and be at about, you know, that. Again, I want to say that the laboratory levels are at 7%, far above where we expect it to be at this point. And every time we add a percent, we actually kind of radically jump into this market further and deeper. So we'll look at other types of derivatives of terrapene, which is the precursor, which provides other also specialty chemicals. But this is a great starting market for this.
I'm not sure that I understood the answer. I thought I was asking a pretty simple question, which is, you're at 7% at the lab.
Yeah.
At what point do you need to be in order to say, okay, I'm ready to sell?
5% in the field.
5% in the field, okay.
And it's forecasting 3 on this deal. So you already, I'm confident you already know this, but the person who's going to lead your investment is a person who cares about and loves tobacco or cosmetics.
Or sharks.
Right? Yeah, or sharks. But like there are a lot of people, I think for you a super important thing is going to be qualifying who you pitch to, right? And just like make sure that there's somebody who could conceivably get down the path. Because this is interesting, and you're like a good communicator on a pretty esoteric topic. Like I felt like I was kind of learning while you were talking, and I'll bet you could get a lot of bullshit meetings that would be a waste of your time. And you should be really careful about not taking those meetings because they'll just chew you up.
But there's
right?
lots of good biotech.
There are biotech investors in North Carolina.
Tobacco deals in North Carolina.
Yeah, but like we probably wouldn't do that.
Yeah, because we don't do biotech.
But seriously, you should talk to him after. And there are 4 or 5 people in the triangle that are legit people you could talk to.
Yeah, you should talk to the biotech center. They give you a $250,000 loan, you know, within a few months probably.
So we were at Biotech Center yesterday talking about the loan.
Nice.
And that's why we're in North Carolina.
Sure.
I mean, I'm having lunch with the treasurer of L'Oreal this afternoon. And the fact is that North Carolina, we're born in Texas, but it's an oil and gas state. The biotech infrastructure here is amazing, but also the tobacco,
right.
history with tobacco is important.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right, and that's why we've made this about North Carolina.
Good for you.
Yeah, it's a good pitch.
You from Austin?
I live in London, England, actually.
Nice.
So,
Really?
yeah.
Don't have much of an accent.
What's that?
You don't have much of an British accent.
I know. I have a passport now, though.
What do y'all want to say? One guy, yeah.
What's the byproduct? What do you do with it?
The byproduct.
Tobacco just
It's char basically, and there is a price for it at like $4 a ton. So the tobacco farmer would off-take that and sell that from what's left over. It's not really a major consideration in the value proposition. Or yes.
Is there an opportunity to partner with, say, a Philip Morris?
For sure. So we've presented to Philip Morris and to Altria. We're pretty early stage, as you can probably see. So that's part of, I think, our natural growth process. Probably after a seed, our A would be with a strategic investor.
I would think a pitch to investor would be to show the true need. You mentioned how the cosmetic industry is going to have an increasing need over time. You know, what their acceptance of it is now and how much they're really researching your idea versus the shark opportunity.
I agree with that.
It was interesting. Thanks, John.